if we can just discipline ourselves to recognize the progress we've made, give ourselves credit for what we've done, not beat ourselves up for what we haven't done, right? Michael Hyatt is a international speaker and coach, and he talks about the big three, having 3 things every day that are the big 3, and those always get done. Not this task list of 30 things, right? That's and especially as an entrepreneur and as an independent business person, it's like we've got to look at the big things that are most important.
Hey, I'm Steve Oakers, and this is I'm Just Steve, the podcast with my buddy Ryan here. And we were having a conversation at Panera just a week ago, and I said, well, we should just record this conversation
because it was a good talk.
Because it was a good talk.
Yeah.
And you have a way about you that's just like so calming, like your voice and just like your presence is just it's just so chill, right? But there's some depth behind it. That's the sort of the beauty of it. So I thought let's talk about the things that we talked about before. But ultimately, for those that are just joining us that might know Ryan, don't know me, and are joining on the podcast is just really about the labels that we implement on ourselves and the labels that people put on us. And we talk about the lenses as sort of a acronym for the labels. So the lenses that we carry along with us. And so I thought it'd be great just to hang out together. Thanks for coming out to Grand Haven.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Not bad weather.
No, it's beautiful out there. It's nice, sunny.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah, you can't complain about the sun. So Ryan is broker.
Associate broker with 5-star. Over 5-star. Yeah.
And you've been selling real estate for
21 years.
21 years. Yeah. Okay, so give me the labels. But we stopped our conversation that we were about to start having about your beautiful bride of 48 years. 48 years. Yeah. I would love to unpack that a little bit. Because 48 years is a long time to be married. And we've had some guests on here that have been divorced. And so I love the idea of having that conversation of someone that has a 48-year legacy of being married. Which then I'm assuming you knew her before that. So it's probably 50 plus years in relationship with this woman. So tell me about the bride. And how you guys met.
So Carol and I met in high school.
Yeah.
And we both went to a school called the New School of Performing Arts in Buffalo, New York. And it was copied after old show, Fame.
Okay.
If you ever watched the trailer to Fame, that's kind of what our school was patterned after. It was really for creative kids who wanted to learn film, theater, in the arts. And I met my wife. Actually, we played opposite roles in this drama. And I remember it's called The Firebugs. Can't remember much about it other than she yelled at me quite a lot. And
has that stopped in 48 years or no?
No, she doesn't yell at me. No, she doesn't yell at me. No, she doesn't yell at me. But my wife's this beautiful woman who she's a classically trained pianist. She was studying violin as well. In fact, all of our instructors were either professionals in their industry or came from things like the Buffalo Philharmonic, the various universities around town. My wife studied with the concertmaster, her violin with the concertmaster from Buffalo Philharmonics when Michael Tilson Thomas was the director. So she had this great history about her. I don't know, something just hit. And so we would take the bus. My mother would drop me off, and I'd take the bus because we lived in the suburbs. She lived well south of the city. Okay. And I'd kind of hang out and wait for her to make sure I caught the right bus, And she was taller than me, blonde hair, long hair, and she wore a long army coat that she bought at the surplus store.
Okay.
And that's kind of my whole, that image that's just cast there in front of me, right?
Yeah.
This beautiful blonde-haired young lady. And we got married right out of high school. She had just turned 19. I was still 18. And so it goes. And so 48 years later, we're still here. We had our first child 3 years later.
Yeah.
We spent
3 years later.
3 years later.
So you were 21.
21 when my oldest son Dan was born. And since then we have 5 other kids, all girls.
Okay.
And so it's been a journey. I mean, it was certainly not easy.
Yeah.
Especially as a 21-year-old, 20-year-old, whatever, trying to figure out my way in life.
Well, and you were in the arts, right? Which doesn't usually make a lot of money
I
either,
wasn't
right?
in the arts at that point. I had to go to work. I got married, right? So I worked for Pizza Hut.
Okay.
That was my first job.
Okay.
And I was a manager at Pizza Hut. Started as an assistant because my sister knew the regional director. We met at a bar, and he said, "You should come to work for me." And I said, "Well, fine. That makes sense to me.
I need a
Why
job.
not?
Yeah.
Need a job." So went to work, and 2 weeks later, they gave me my first restaurant. I mean, I had lots of training, so I mean, why not? 2 weeks is enough, right? And and then they a few weeks after that, an opening came up at this little town in Springville, New York, which happened to be where my wife grew up.
Okay.
And I said, "Well, of course I'll go there." It had a dishwasher, so that made sense to go to the place that had the dishwasher. And so my career at Pizza Hut lasted about 11 years. I became an area manager.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And we lived in this little town of Springville for the first 8 or 9 years of our marriage. And then we relocated into Jersey, wherein Pizza Hut sent me out there to open up restaurants.
Okay.
And we lived in the Poconos. I commuted every day into North Jersey and opened up some pretty amazing. It was a pretty amazing opportunity for me there. Yeah. And I spent a lot of time bouncing around in various restaurants because that's just kind of what happens. So once you get into that industry, it kind of goes that way. Okay. But our kids are Melanie's 40 years old right now, and our daughter Emery is 35. And then in our late 40s, we decided to adopt.
Okay. Just felt the call that you weren't done.
Well, my wife felt the call.
Okay. Yeah.
I felt like we were done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when my wife's mother passed, she left her a little bit of money, and my wife said, "Well, now we can afford to adopt a little girl from China."
Okay.
And at that point, there were all these stories coming out of all the kids in China that were being in really bad situations. Oh. So I was thinking we'd get a cottage, but she thought a child would be better. So I relented.
Yeah.
And we went and I don't remember the exact year it was. I think 2000. It was right after after SARS.
Okay.
There was a big SARS epidemic in Asia. Yeah. And so we picked up Leah it would have been like end of April. Yeah, end of April. I think it was 2001, I believe.
Okay.
And so when you go there, the first thing you do is you go to Beijing and you spend some time. They try to get you acclimated to China, if you can, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then we were with a big group from Bethany Christian Services, put the whole thing together.
Yeah.
With this big group, and then we split up.
And all of the people were there to adopt?
All the way to adopt. And and then after 3 days, they split us up and sent us to the province where our kids were.
Yeah, before we jump into the kids, how did that, I know how my conversation went with Amy on adopting, or we ended up not adopting outside of the region. It became harder, right? I think it was a little bit not necessarily easy, but adoption outside of the country was more normal 20 years ago.
Right.
7 or 8 years ago it wasn't, or 10 years now. So I tell me how that conversation and internal battle, I don't want to say battle, but that the discussion between you and your wife on, I want a cottage, no, I want a daughter, right? Like, because I think that, 48 years of marriage, those moments are like, okay, wait a minute. I thought we were heading this way in our life. You thought we were heading this way. How do we come back together to head towards the same thing? Like, how did that play out? Or how do you those that are watching that are in that phase of life that, okay, like, I think we're heading this way. She thinks I'm heading that way, or opposite.
Right.
How do we find that this road is the right road? How did you process that?
It really wasn't very hard because I understood, and I really understand that my wife is far more grounded than I am.
Okay.
She is really the stability, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And so it was, it really. We love our kids, right? We adore being parents, right? And we knew that it was somehow the right thing, okay? Our faith plays a lot of that. Yeah. So I joke about me wanting a cottage. It's like, that was my first thought. But then it was like, well, all right, well, I've never been to China, so that'd be kind of cool.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
that would be okay.
Yeah.
And ultimately, when we started down that path and listened and went to meetings and looked at kids and kind of had these dialogues, it became very evident that, yeah, this is something we need to do.
Yeah.
We can do this one time, right?
Okay. Yep.
We can do this one time.
Yep. Yep.
And so
Because we can handle it. Our
Yeah.
oldest are out of the house at that
well,
point,
at
right?
that
Or
point,
close?
no, the youngest was 13.
Okay.
Or
Yeah.
the youngest would have been 13.
Okay.
She was more of not difficult. She was more of the challenge because she is the baby, and all of a sudden
Yeah.
she's not going to be the baby.
Right. Yeah.
So
And not just
yeah.
like, oh, a baby arrives. It's a challenge.
Right.
Where
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
adoption isn't.
It is
Not
easy.
that
It's not.
childbirth
No,
is
no,
not
no,
a challenge, but it's a
not easy.
very different,
Very different experience.
process. Yeah.
And we specifically chose China because there were plenty of options where we could have gone and got infants, and we did not want an infant. We wanted to get in that 1 to 3 year range
Okay.
because we felt very, very much that there were lots of childless parents that wanted that experience.
Yeah.
We had that experience. Okay.
Yeah.
And then Bethany brought to us the idea of adopting special needs,
Okay.
which was way out of kind of left field.
Yeah.
The advantage was
Because you didn't have experience in that.
No,
you didn't
not
have
at all.
you know,
No,
I always think
nothing
of that
at all,
as
no.
like, oh well,
Yeah.
I have an education or I have a background or whatever. No.
Nothing at all. All
Yeah.
we had was, at that point, what would have been 20 some years of parenting,
Right.
right? And so we looked at that, and the advantage was we would know which child we were going to get.
Okay.
And then, but the strange thing was they brought us a book and said, "Here, pick one."
Yikes.
Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
Right? Looking through pictures, sorting through,
Right.
trying to decide, and
Right.
trying to determine who this child's going to be. And we ultimately did, and we did that 3 times.
Yeah.
Three times, all with very similar types of disabilities.
Because one
issues.
wasn't enough, or you just felt like once you had
Sure.
one, like the book is so full, we have room for more.
Well, I will tell you that when I went to China, I remember the day before the night before we left.
Yeah.
I turned off my cell phone for the first time in years,
Okay.
and I left my cell phone because
Yeah.
at that point there was no
Cell
there was no
service.
way to communicate.
Right.
Pictures were film cameras. Right.
Right.
I had a lead line bag taking over my film. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very different situation than it is
Yeah.
now, right? And so for me, it was a leaving behind a life. It was leaving behind this race of pursuing something, career, money, ambition, all those kind of things, and really giving up and letting go of those kind of things.
And you felt that once you dropped your phone and left it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So in China, that's where you're like, wait,
Yeah.
this is bigger than me.
Yeah. And then on the way there, we met the families on the way. We all kind of,
Yeah.
I think we all ended up in Detroit, if I remember right. We all
Okay.
traveled out together. And there were several women that were traveling by themselves,
Okay.
whose husbands weren't traveling with them, or that were single women.
Okay.
And so I kind of made it my mission to help them,
Okay.
because who's going to carry the luggage? Who's going to,
Yeah.
because you just
Yeah.
don't, all those kind of things. And so it was really becoming an act of service, kind of just stepped into that role.
Yeah.
And when I had said that we spent 3 days in Beijing, just kind of being tourists, which was a lot of fun, right? And then it was time to get real, and so we went to Wuhan before anybody knew where Wuhan was, right?
Yeah.
And that's where we got our daughter Leah.
Okay.
And we went with another couple who was similar age. They're from Pennsylvania, and they were adopting I think a 12 or a 13-year-old girl at that point. And so we connected with them very well. And we got to Wuhan, and we had dinner, and we were in this beautiful hotel. The hotels are stunning. All right, they only put us in hotels where the Americans could go. Right.
Right.
Beautiful facilities. The next day we arrived, and the orphanage director shows up with the nanny who was taking care of our daughter, and handed her to my wife, and I was standing right behind her, and Leah reached out and grabbed me and like latched on. And it was amazing. I can't even, words cannot describe how I felt.
Yeah.
Right. Fortunately, my wife was prepared for that. She was ready, because the only thing Leah would do all the time we were in Florida was let her bathe her.
Yeah.
That was me. It was me, and that was it. So
Yeah.
it was pretty dynamic. And the next day we visited.
It was pretty instant then.
Oh, it was every bit as powerful as being there in the delivery room.
Yeah.
When my kids were born.
Do you think you were reserved before then? Like you were careful on your emotions before you went? That's why you didn't feel that connection until that moment?
Well, I think there was lots of anticipation, lots of fear, but there's all these details. You know,
you're just going through the steps.
Yeah, there's we had thousands of dollars in $100 bills that we had to carry with us in cash, and all these kinds of details and things. So there really wasn't a lot of time to experience that until that moment, right?
Yeah.
And then it became real because up to that point we had an image,
right?
But we didn't have the person,
right?
And then we met our daughter,
and
then she fell asleep on me, and
it's over.
And that's it's just this complete melting of love that just washes over you in a way that I can't describe.
Yeah. Amy and I, we fostered, right, which was that was different. Because, the idea of foster wasn't adoption. The idea of foster is to reacclimate them to their biological parents if their biological parents can get to a place where they can then parent. And so that was hard for me because it's like, do I want to get emotionally attached to this child when my job is to parent and to love them? But I also want to protect my own emotions. And I remember in my men's group sort of saying this is amazing. I love these kids and And one of the guys was like, hey dude, you got to go all in. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I am. And he's like, no, you're holding back. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, if you look at it, this child, they might go back to their parent, but you don't know if that child will ever have a father like you.
Exactly.
And so you need to step into that role, even if it's for a month, be dad. And I was like, oh crap. That's a different kind of an accountability conversation of being like, oh man, okay. Am I the adult or is the kid the adult? I need to be the adult in the room and say oh yeah, this is my job. I've signed up for being dad, fully.
Yes.
But it's hard. It's different, right? It's okay. I think as men going through the adoption process, I think the women almost, I know with Amy, it felt like she was having another baby as going through that, being called, do we want this kid? Yes. Now let's reacclimate. For me, it was, it took that moment where I was like, oh, okay, now I'm dad, right? But you get busy in the I would go to the court hearings. I would go to it's like, okay, I'm being very tactful. This is how you go about it as a man. And it's like, oh wait, no, emotion needs to come in here, right?
Yeah. Well, and from my case, my wife really did all the paperwork because I was traveling a lot.
Okay.
My job at the time had me traveling.
Yeah.
So she kind of did all the details.
Yeah.
All the count, because we lived in a variety of states, so we had to get police reports from every state that we lived in. We had to get all kinds of fingerprints. And my wife has challenges with fingerprints because she plays the piano, and that's the problem with fingerprints. You know, all these kinds of craziness things that you jump through.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it was about 3 days after getting Leah that we went to a Chinese orphanage.
Mm-hmm.
We went, the couple we were with, we went to visit the orphanage where their daughter was. And I met just all these kids. There was one room that was all Downs kids.
Mm.
There was, rooms with babies where, and they always talked about that the babies didn't cry because they knew it didn't matter.
Oh.
They stopped crying.
Okay.
And and we witnessed that, right? And it was there that I realized that we were going to come back and get another child.
Okay.
It was very clear to me.
Yeah, the need is so great.
Yeah,
and we have the ability.
Even if we don't have a lot of money, we don't have a lot of things, we have more than they have.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we started the process for our second adoption as soon as we got back to Grand Rapids.
Yeah.
Didn't take very long.
How do you feel about adoption now? Like it is harder, right, to do
internet.
Again,
well,
we try to do international, and basically we were told because of I don't remember what exactly they called it, but basically like, hey, these countries don't want to adopt anymore.
Yeah, China's
because
not. Yeah,
because
China's
it
pretty
looks
much
bad
shut
on them,
Right.
right? Like they can't give their babies to Americans
Yeah.
and be considered an established country, right? That
Yeah.
and then also unfortunately there was some of the taking babies and
Yes.
selling babies, specifically mostly out of Russia,
Mhm.
and so they're like, yeah, it's real hard. And so we'd sign up for one country and then all of a sudden be like, nope, that country's not doing it anymore. And then it was like, oh, okay. So do you track that at all still of
No,
like the
I
need
think
and the not, or do
I,
you think like they actually are being taken care of now?
well, I think it's been a long time now.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's been because our last daughter we got when she was 3 years old.
Yeah.
And she's now 21.
Yeah.
So I think we've kind of gotten into the rhythm of life.
Yeah.
We kind of like, all right, we're done with that. And we certainly support people, and we have connections with people that we have one family that has been waiting for a child, pretty severely disabled child out of China, that Lord knows whether they'll ever see that boy or not.
Right.
But, the Chinese government had a change of heart. And some of that's just pure economics.
Yeah.
There's just not enough. They're losing population, and they don't have enough girls, and they sent them all here.
Yeah.
They sent thousands and thousands and thousands every year here. And the reality of us for adoption has shifted from that experience to kind of the aftermath of it, the identity that they may or may not have, right? Because they're American, but yet they have this Chinese heritage that they know very little about. They don't look like, somebody finally told us, well, you've got an interracial, a biracial family now. I never thought about it that way. Never even crossed my mind.
Right.
And of course, I've had gray hair for a long time. So I can remember I was holding my daughter Leah. So I'm 47 years old. And this woman came up to me. We were there at a dance recital or something. And this woman commented about my daughter. And I said, well, thank you very much. And she said, well, she called her my granddaughter. I said, no, it's my daughter. And she said, well, you can't be your daughter.
Yeah.
Like, no, it's my daughter. And so there is this age thing that kind of plays into that.
Yeah.
So it's again, for us, it's kind of we've moved on to the challenges that we faced as having this mixed family, this generationally separated family, and also just the challenges of what their life experience is like from the trauma that they experienced as babies, adjusting to that, the numbers of surgeries that we had, finding resources for those things. We were blessed that they were available, right?
Right.
And we were blessed that people in our lives connected us with people like groups like the Shriners Hospital, which has just been amazing in our life. It had a really big impact for all of our kids. But it's just really, I think it's more now watching people and realizing that more and more people are fostering and going through that process, which what you experienced, which offers its own challenges. And it's similar but different.
Yeah.
Similar but different.
Yeah. I mean, it's still taking on something new that isn't you, but then they become you, right?
Become you, right?
It's. I mean, we get that, right? Nico is biracial, and that's an interesting thing, right, for him to try to swim through, right? Even where do you get his haircut, right? I mean, I brought him to get a haircut at a new place that me and the boys were getting, I don't know, maybe a year ago, and it was awful. He got an awful haircut. I'm admitting it for the first time here, but everybody told me that.
Right? Yeah.
But I was like, like that fade does not look right. Like it just does. Like, it doesn't. And so, it's a beautiful challenge, even though it's very difficult, right? It's a challenge that you know going in that you're adopting and that there's going to be challenges with it. But once you get into it, it's like, oh, okay. Like there's a lot of history we don't know about these kids, even though, I mean, Nico was 10 months old and Peyton was 2, but you were still unpacking things where it's like, why is she acting that way? Like that's in her, right? And that's her genes, that's her history, that's her parents. Like,
and it requires a different parenting style than with our biological kids.
Yeah,
very different. You have to adapt and flow with those things, and it can be challenging because you don't really understand.
Yeah.
And what we've learned is that, or what we found is that the physical side of their lives is pretty easy to work with. There's lots of resources. The psychological side, there's not lots of resources.
Which is normal in general, right?
Exactly,
with anybody. I mean, that's part of our conversation of these lenses. It's very hard to see, oh, they look healthy, they look normal, or no, they have their hands need work, or okay, we can see that need. We can fix as a population of the US, fix that need because it's present, but the stuff inside is not present, right? Or it comes out in unhealthy ways, and then it's like, oh, but they're trouble now because it's unhealthy, and it's like, but that's not any different than their hands, right? Exactly. It's just going to take time and energy to try to figure this out, and we don't know if we're going to figure it out completely. Do the girls then? Are they close because of all coming from that? From China, like, does that create a connectivity
for the most part, but
they're sisters?
But there's similar battles that any child, any siblings go through, right? It's the same. There's I'd say there's more similarities than differences in that regard.
Yeah,
and they each kind of have their own closeness with one of their siblings, right? My son was, pretty at that point, almost married and then married, so he was kind of not involved a lot, not very close. Both of my biological daughters went with us on the second. One went on the second trip, one went on the third trip. So they kind of connected right there in China, which was fun for them to be able to experience that, and for us because that really helped in the trip. Because of course, the older we got, the harder. It was a hard trip. It's a really difficult trip. You're there a lot. You're there for a long time. The traveling, all that kind of stuff. But now it's become kind of a norm, right? We've gotten this normal kind of recognition of, we still recognize their adoption days as very special days for us. As they've gotten older, they've gained more interest in China. So there's some more inquiry about certain things of China, and more like identification with like Chinese New Year and those kind of things.
Okay. And you're coming alongside in that conversation
as much as we can. As much as we can. Yeah. And now that they're older, they're able to make some of those choices in college, whether they're going to take Mandarin courses and that kind of stuff.
Are they gravitating towards that then? Is that
my oldest Leah, she has a minor in Mandarin.
Okay.
Yeah, there's only a couple universities in Michigan where you could actually get any kind of a degree in Mandarin.
Right.
So she got a minor in Mandarin because she has an international business degree.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So if we fast forward then, our conversation really last week was about being seen.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And this transition in life that you're in from raising all these kiddos, right? And I mean, I'm in that thick, right? Where it's like, okay, the battle is just kids right now, right? And we're in the thick of all of the things, right? We like dad today, but we don't like him tomorrow. Kind of, that stuff.
That never
right?
goes away.
Yeah.
It's always there.
Well, good to know.
It doesn't go away. That'll be there for a long time.
Yeah. But we talked about your sort of trying to figure out then this next pattern in life of how to have a new voice in a way. Because your job, your role as associate broker has come about, but you were broker to another real estate firm, and broker before that to another real estate firm. And so can you help those that are in that transition in life to help think through like where you're putting your energy, your brain in that space of transition, right?
Sure. I think what I've experienced, I'm 67 years old. So in my 67 years, I've experienced that we all go through various stages. right?
Yeah.
And probably, and we talked at that table a week ago or whatever, that there's these significant moments, right?
Yeah.
And so, like for me, one of the most significant moments was the adoption of my kids, and that really rooted us in Grand Rapids, because shortly after the second adoption, actually in the middle of our second, we were getting our child. I was in China. I lost a job, and at that point, I was working for Burger King Corporation as what they call I was basically a trainer, as a corporate trainer and quality assurance guy, and so I was committed, though, to that I wasn't going to move these kids around. I was not going to make them move to another state. And my only option, because of the specialty role that I had, was really going into the Northeast, which I don't want to go back that way, or into Texas. And those were two distinctively different opportunities. But so that's what brought me to real estate, because I was not going to move anymore.
Okay.
And we love Grand Rapids, so that's another thing. Grand Rapids is really.
And you had
what we
been
call
here
home.
for a little while then at that point?
We moved to Grand Rapids in 1994.
Okay.
1994.
Okay, so you had been here a good 6
We've been,
years.
we were
at that
pretty
point,
well rooted in our house.
established.
We moved away for a very, very brief time for about several months, and then came back to Grand Rapids. We built a house. We've been in that house now for 24 years.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
the longest I've ever lived anywhere. Right.
Okay.
So that was really key, because we anchored here. Right.
Yeah.
And then it became, well, what do I do? And I moved to real estate specifically because I had moved so much, I'd relocated so much, that I felt that I could connect with people because I think real estate is, when you meet people in most real estate transactions, there's something going on in their life that is probably difficult. It could be good. Maybe they got a new job promotion, or they're relocating. But there's a lot of times there's death, there's divorce, there's bad things that are going on, job losses, all those kind of things. So there's I felt I would be well positioned to be able to work with people and help people through those things. Okay? The place where I am now, I kind of look at this as kind of like my fourth quarter. So what am I going to do for the fourth quarter of my life, right? I've got, God willing, I've got 20, 25, maybe 30 years left, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to reach into life and make it sacred. Because out of all these things, my foundation, the biggest thing for me is my faith, right? That is kind of the rock in which I'm building everything on, right? And I believe that everything we do can be sacred. These moments can be sacred, right?
Yeah.
These moments can, because hopefully somebody listens and hears something that makes a difference for them. Maybe it's a comfort, maybe it's an encouragement. We don't know, right? But so my whole approach in everything that I do now is moving into that sacred space, right? To trying to value people, value where that individual is, if I'm working with them in real estate, or if I'm a life coach, and so I'm working with them on life coaching issues. In my church, all those things are all about trying to build relationships, deepen those roots of that relationship, and be there for them in whatever way that might be. I don't know if that helps. If that answers the question or not.
So, when did you come to that realization that it's fourth quarter?
After my last transition, from when my prior business partner came to me and said, I want to be on my own, and I now had to make a choice. What am I going to do? How am I going to respond to that? Right? Yeah. I lived out my usefulness in that particular role. Okay, I achieved I ultimately achieved what I had set out to do, and which was to have him be independent. So that was perfect. And that's really when I think I realized it was like, okay, this is the fourth quarter. This is a time where it's time to take all this experience, all these beautiful things that I've learned, the people that I've encountered, and try to figure out, how do I manage through the technical part of it. You got to have some income. You got to make enough money. I still got 3 kids that are living in my house. It's not like I can sell it all and just, go to a 55+ community in Florida and hang it up, right? I can't do that.
Yeah.
And that would be just a waste. I mean, that would be why I still have all this time in front of me that I can hopefully help others in some way and impact their lives. And
are you seeing that of your peer group as well? That the idea of retirement and packing it in, or what, like that transition? Are you seeing that? I feel like that's something that's coming about as boomers start to get to that spot where it's like, wait a minute, like. Why'd I do all that? Like I raised all these children. I've had all these multiple iterations in my career. I have all this knowledge. Do I really just want to play pickleball in Florida? Like where, like, is that a thing that you're seeing of your peers or no?
I think more and more I am, because I believe that there, and it's driven by a lot of, there's several things, there's the economics of it. Right? There's this economic pressure that's a little different than what it was 20 years ago. And I think there's this ongoing sense of reality that people, especially people as our society, I think understands that we're not meant to do nothing. Yeah. We're not meant to just sit around, right? We're not meant to just sit and, click the TV or whatever that might be. There's something else there. And so we're seeing that rise, and I think we're seeing that rise in volunteerism. People figure out, okay, well, I retire. Well, what does that mean? I'm busier now than I ever have been, right? I went to the auto show this weekend, and I met this lady who's retired, and she's at the auto show helping out because one of her friends ran the show and needed some help. And she's doing all these things, busier than she was when she was working, right? Working more now.
But fulfilled.
But very fulfilled. Yeah, very fulfilled. Yeah. And a while ago, I was exposed to this program called the Blue Zones, which is the areas of the world where there's more centurions, right? The Blue Zones.
There's a documentary.
There's a whole
right.
Yeah. And I have
where is that documentary? Have you watched it?
It was done by National Geographic, and I can't remember, and I forget.
Just one dude that does a lot of studying. Right. I mean, there's been plenty of people, but then he goes to these other cultures, right?
And I heard him live. Right?
Yeah,
I heard him live.
Yeah, I've watched some of it. Yeah, it's really fascinating.
Very fascinating. And the common denominators are community, right? Yeah. Community, activity, that you're doing something
moving
of value, right?
Yeah.
You're moving and you're doing something of value.
Yeah.
My golf partner is 81 years old. He writes loans every day.
Yeah.
He retired for a day at 68 or something, and then just went back to work. And so now he just keeps writing loans,
right?
5 days a week. Right?
Yeah.
You can't even fathom not. And I think there's it's more than just, well, I'm going to golf every day.
Yeah.
Because there's got to be some value. I think we have to have it. That's how I'm filled anyway. That's how I operate.
And there's nothing wrong, I think, with someone that says, like, I've put a lot of time and effort in. I want to golf more. I want to do these things.
Absolutely.
But I do. The documentary was really interesting to see. I remember him talking about like the longevity of being a gardener, right?
Yes,
and that the activity of producing something with your hands, but the movement of up and down and
natural
eating,
movement, right?
And
natural movement.
So as you're looking at fourth quarter, that's really your focus right now, is finding those three major things for you of activity, meaning, and community.
Yeah.
Are those the three?
Those are the primary areas that I'm really focused on. And again, it's a balancing act, because there's a need for income. You got to make a certain amount of money so you can be able to do those kind of things, right? I'm not in a position where I could just stop and say, okay, I'm going to spend all my time serving in my church and visiting monasteries and playing golf or whatever. I'm not.
And some can.
And some can, right? And that's good. But I think, for me, it's moving more and more into the nonprofit world. I'm very interested in especially with so much what we're seeing in housing and such the difficulties we're seeing in housing, and really got a real lot of desire to serve in that way. So it's really living out a life of service, right? And integrating that into all of the activities. And I can remember when I first got into real estate, 2 years after I got into real estate, I think it was about 2 years, was when the market all crashed, right? And I would sit there, and I worked for a lot of banks. So it did a lot of foreclosure work.
Yeah.
And I would sit there and counsel these mostly women whose husbands left because they're, got divorced, they're frustrated, the house is going, and
Yeah.
they were all full of fear, and I would help them to understand the process so they
Mhm.
understood what their rights were, what they could do. So really became an act of service.
Mhm.
And I think that's really what I want life to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fulfilling that
Yeah.
that calling
Yeah, absolutely.
of service.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so how are you going unpacking that idea or understanding of having your voice in those three? Like,
Sure.
do you feel like you're already there, or you're
Oh, no, I'm not
no.
near
So
nowhere near where I want to be. Yeah.
so I'm a vision board dude.
Yeah.
I think you know that. Like,
Sure.
I
Oh,
love
yeah.
doing
Yeah.
the vision boards. And those aren't 5 years. Those are 1 year.
Yeah.
I've never been a 5-year goal planner. Are you have you ever been a 5-year goal planner?
I've got a 20-year plan. what
You have a
life looks
20-year
like.
plan?
Yeah. I mean, it's filled with generalities of what that looks like,
Yeah.
right?
Do you reestablish that each year, or when did you establish your 20-year plan?
That was done probably 5 years ago.
Okay.
And I've updated and tweaked certain parts of it, but it's the vision doesn't really change, right? The vision is in my world anyway, revolves around this sense of peace and gratitude of that every day ends with this kind of peacefulness that I can sleep and put my head down on the pillow and know that I did good today. That somehow it was filled with and it was somehow filled with acts of service and kindness to people that bettered humanity in some way.
Do you keep record of that through the day? How do you
Sure.
sense that at the end of the day? Like, oh, I did that.
A gratitude journal.
You do?
Yeah.
So you
Journaling-
gratitude in the
journaling
morning
things, yeah.
or in the evening?
A little bit of both,
Okay.
depending on the day. But
Yeah.
I've been trying to introduce it into my nighttime routine consistently because that's where that I find helps me to be more focused on what was good.
It grounded you in the day and
say,
"Good
okay,
job."
it was good because I've learned that through coaching people, that I listen to them talk about what their obstacles are, and I was with a coaching client yesterday, and I heard him rattle off 3 very important things that happened during the day, but yet he was still feeling unfulfilled.
Okay.
Because he was focused on the things that didn't get done. He was
Yeah.
focused on the task list that didn't
Right,
get done,
right.
as opposed to these beautiful connections that he had with people. And I think if we can reframe our lives, right, reframe the way we look at things, especially at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, it just sets a different tone, right?
Yeah, I've never heard that end of day thought process.
Yeah.
Like, the miracle morning,
Oh, yeah.
or the get up, the 5 a.m. club, you name it. The idea of meditation to start the day. And meditation can be different for anyone. That can be opening a book, that could be studying the Bible, that can just be quiet, right? You name it. But I've obviously I've heard of that and try to practice some of that. But not at the end of the day.
We don't. The problem, I think, for like lack of sleep is a reality, right? It's just a reality in our society, right?
Yeah.
And it's my reality too. I wake up in the middle of the night. I mean, frequently, right? But I sleep really pretty well up to that point. And I think having a process of shutting down, of getting rid of the blue light, but it's more than that. It's actually intentionally slowing our brain down, intentionally. Do we read something, but if we read a novel, a suspense novel, and all of a sudden we're all keyed up, right? We've got to slow ourselves down. We've got to breathe. We have to, try to meditate on things. And I think that idea of looking at things that we're grateful for is so important, because that is how we cure a lot of our anxiety, right? If we can just take a moment and pause and realize that everything from, the pen that you have, the water, there's all kinds of things that we can really, really be grateful for. And how many times do we miss that? How many, we get aggravated because of the snow, but do we look at the beauty of it and realize what that's bringing for us in the spring? All those kind of things.
And that idea of the morning allows you to recognize it better than trying to remember it from the next morning.
Sure. But if, and I think some of my disciplines or habits are coming really out of my experience in church, because my church it teaches periodic prayer throughout the day.
Okay.
Prayer, and it's always prayer and meditation, meditating on the prayer, meditating on people, that sort of thing. And the more we can bring that into that, for me anyway, the more I can bring that into my day, the more I can take moments of just pausing and saying a short prayer and meditating. The same kind of thing at night, of just pausing and focusing in on what was good.
Yeah.
And
is that an actual, like, okay, I'm going to go to bed at 9:00 tonight, so at 8:30 I'm going to start this practice to prepare me for falling asleep?
Yeah, some type of a half hour to an hour type of practice.
Can you tell us that?
Sure.
For those that, like, I don't do that, and I'm very,
sure.
I'm
absolutely.
watching TV with Ellen Grace, and we're both looking at each other like, who's going to be the first one that taps out? It's like 90%
I'm always
me.
the first one. I'm always the first one.
I'm always like, can I tap out because I'm
Yeah.
ready for bed?
Yeah.
And then we're crawling into bed, talking for a couple minutes, and rolling over, right?
Right.
So, I'm going from all interactions to nothing.
Now I got to sleep, right?
Now
How
I
do
got
you
to
do
sleep.
that, right? And so for me, it's generally about 9:30 is when everything's off, right? Or not, half hour before then, like getting off my phone or my computer or whatever. So I'm getting rid of that blue light, right? And then I'm pretty intentional about what I watch at night.
Okay.
Because there's certain things that I know will upset me.
Yeah.
And and there's certain things that don't, right? And so if there's something that I know is going to be upsetting to me, like I can't watch shows about trafficked kids and things like that.
Sure.
That just makes
the Law and Order is not.
That is not my thing to watch.
See, that's all Ellen Grace wants to watch.
Right,
so we watch that.
And I get it. And I get it. I mean, it's a good show.
It's a good show,
right?
Yeah.
So I'm pretty selective about that. And then really it's
documentaries. What are you putting in your brain?
Well, I mean, there's some of that. There's some shows that the topics are not that way, right? Yeah. And and I grew up with 5 daughters, so I will tell you that there's a lot of rom-coms in my life. Right?
Yeah, I grew up with 4 strong females,
sure,
and everybody's like rom-coms, like, and I'm like, I love them. I just do.
Yeah. Simple.
They make you feel good.
Right. Don't have to think a lot.
Yeah,
right?
you know the ending. And you're like, that was cute. It made me laugh a little bit, and we can.
And so then for me, it's I get all ready for bed, and I always have everything ready for the morning, so that I know what I'm going to do in the morning.
Yeah,
because I find that's because if I have to look for things, because I'm up before my wife, so I'm in the dark. So now I know where I can get all my clothes, and I'm ready to go. And then I have a noise machine, that I do. But then it's in my bed. It's prayer. It's meditation. It's reflecting on those good things in my life.
So next to your bed, you sort of have a place with your stuff that help you get grounded for going to bed.
And my nightly prayers I've got memorized, so I just kind of use a standard prayer that my church would subscribe to. So and that's what I use. And then with some specific people that I pray for in that.
Right.
Do
you write down your gratitudes then, or you just replay them?
At night, I just replay them.
Okay.
At night, I just replay them.
In the morning, you're a writer?
In the morning, I write them, yeah.
Is it just a random white notebook?
Just a book that's just filled, right? Page after page, yeah, that's it. Just random kind of, and it's in a book, but it's
right. But it's not formatted.
No, I didn't know. Just because it might be 12 things, right? And it's I'm grateful for. Fill in the blank. What is that, right? Yeah. And sometimes it's hard to figure that out.
Yeah.
But there's always something, right?
Seasons, right?
Right. There's seasons, but it's like it might just be as simple as I'm grateful that I have a pen that I can write with today, right? I'm grateful that I have a home that's warm, and that I have electricity, and that I have food that I can have. I'm grateful that my dog is sitting here, right? Mm-hmm. My dog is always in my little prayer corner. My dog lays down and is on his little cot, with me while I pray. And those are. Just there's something peaceful and calming about that for me, But the nighttime thing is really a matter of intentionally focusing on what I'm grateful for, the people in my life, my relationship with my Lord, and trying to slow myself down. Depending on the day, I might pull a recorded meditation of sorts, but generally I found that I've been disciplined enough that I can just do box breathing. If you're familiar with box breathing, a four, in 4 count, hold it, and then out 4 count and hold it, and do that, and that slows me down and enables me to be able to just drift off to sleep.
Have you always done this practice,
No,
or is this
no.
something that you have? When did you start establishing this?
Sure. It was my business coach, Joe Stumpf. He instituted these kind of habits with me. That's something that when I started into real estate. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's just been kind of growing with that. There's been I've had a couple of instances where I had 2 different experiences with Joe at his home in California, and both of those revolved a lot around meditation.
Okay. Yeah. Because I always get into it and then I get out of it.
Sure. It's
right.
any
Like
habit, right?
I
Yeah.
will. I mean, I mean, if I look at my book here, I have December 22 was the last time I wrote down. I'm happy and this is why.
Right.
And so I'll jump into it for a week or 2, and then I'll jump it's but I know we talked about this, and one of my buddies is going to your church now too. And he talked a lot about the church that you go to is super repetitive in the actions that they take to then get to a place to be open to discussion, right? And to get into learning, but the repetition gets you into the learning. And that's kind of what you're talking about in this morning practice and this evening practices. By doing the ritual of the activity gets you into that practice. Is that
true? I think that's pretty fair. It really is. We all kind of get off of habits that we develop, right? And so we all kind of need reminders of that. So for me, it's been, and especially through my real estate coach, has been this kind of annual discipline of kind of refreshing on those things, right? To look back at them and go, okay, where are you at? Right now, I'm going through a class with them that is all about morning and evening ritual and cleaning that up. And I've looked back at the list and went, well, I do those 3 things, but I could add that. That might be a good thing to add this time, right?
What are those? What are those things?
Oh, adding there is. Trying to think of my biggest add is the need to go to the gym in the morning. That's my biggest add, my biggest resistance.
So trying to come up with morning habits and evening habits
that are really clean, right? But that's in the a morning ritual. We all have a morning ritual of some sort. Everybody does.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I can't. Accepting the fact that I can't be part of the 5 a.m. club like I used to be. 10 years ago, I could do that. Now I can't anymore. I just can't. And so I've got to readjust some of my time and how I'm handling things. And I think that's where rituals, everybody's rituals should be different. There shouldn't, we all live to this expectation of, you start off and go, I want to be part of the 5 a.m. the club or that miracle morning, and then you go, oh, this is hard, and it is hard, right? And it may not be right for you because you're biologically that may not work for you. My wife.
Yeah, it's easy to say like this person said that's the right way, so I'm going to try it, and then you feel like a failure, even though you're not really wired to do that.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I am. I'm a more like I was at the playing tennis at 5:15 this morning, like. And so if I have an appointment, like I love the mornings, but you're not going to get me doing anything at 9 p.m. or after, right?
Yeah.
Really by 7:30, 8 o'clock, I'm done.
Right.
But I remember when I had the bigger brokerage, 2 things. One, Bill Pearl would always say, like, he would be teaching all these new agents that we would have, and he'd be talking about, the ritual and the calendar and going through setting their prospecting time and their things. And I'd always, that's hogwash, right? Like, I couldn't say that because I'm the owner of the brokerage, but and he was very good at it. And I thought it was, and it was wise stuff. And he would always remind me, like, Steve, you have your rhythm that works for you, and you do the same stuff every day. And I'd always be like, no, I don't, because it wasn't as cool, but I do, you do, right? It's like, oh yeah, you're right. I get up at this time, I do these things, I set these kind of meetings. And if I'm in that world that is that is,
Mhm.
I am the best version of me because I am steady in that, right?
And I think that's the key. The key you just said is the best version. And so, for me, like I've got a time block calendar,
Yeah.
and every once in a while I'll pull it up and go, how am I doing to it? Am I
Yeah.
really living to the expectation?
Yeah.
And oftentimes I'm getting off track so here and there, but then you kind of bring it back in and you go, okay, well, that's a reminder of it. I need to tighten that up a little bit. And when you're learning and when you're starting to develop those new habits, well, you have, sometimes you have to be very structured about it. You need some accountability. You need some boundaries. You need, maybe you need to gamify it and make a game of it, and there's all kinds of ways and methods to do that.
Yeah.
The big thing is you can't beat yourself up when you fail, right? When you fall short, because you didn't fail, you fall short.
Yeah.
But
that is the feeling that people get with accountability, right?
Yeah,
like
right.
I don't want a coach or a business coach, or I don't want a mentor because I'm afraid of the failure that comes from not living up to the expectation of that person that's trying to hold me accountable.
In my my coaching, what I talk to people about is there's this gap between where you are and where you want to be, and our task is to just close that gap.
The coach is the gap.
I mean, we close that gap, right? We get that gap tighter and tighter, and you may never ever get to that goal, because that goal may shift a little bit, right? That goal may go out a little bit further because you realize, I did that, I can do a little bit more. And I think if we can focus on the progress that we've made and recognize that it's not about making 50% progress in a month, it's about if we the old adage, 1% a month or 1% a day or every day, where do we end up? And I think if we can just discipline ourselves to recognize the progress we've made, give ourselves credit for what we've done, not beat ourselves up for what we haven't done, right? And Michael Hyatt is a international speaker and coach, and he talks about the big three, having 3 things every day that are the big 3, and those always get done. Not this task list of 30 things, right? That's and especially as an entrepreneur and as an independent business person, it's like we've got to look at the big things that are most important, because a lot of times the thing in our the tasks that we have on our task list are easy things to do. The big 3, though, those are the getting in front of people, having good communications and contacts with people, all those things. And it's different. And every day is different. But we've got to remind ourselves and remember that, look at what we've done well, and not measure ourselves up against, who we see on what I call fake book, right? Because that's what we do. We look at Facebook and we go, oh, they did this, they did that. Well, so what? What are you doing? How did you compare to the last month? How did you compare to yesterday? Yeah.
Well, and that goes back to that lens idea of like, hey, you don't know what they're dealing with. Like they look like they're doing great, but they could be falling apart behind.
Right. Nobody knows. Nobody knows the truth. Right. And we've got to be careful of that. And that's what we know that, we're marketers.
Yeah.
And what are we going to put on Facebook?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We're going to put up the best of the best.
Yeah.
Because that's our job. Right. Our job is to market. And so we have to be careful how we interpret those things.
Right. Yeah. I do think that that's changing some as people want real humans.
More vulnerability. Yeah.
Right. And I like the fact that people are starting to be more vulnerable, which allows me to do this podcast.
Absolutely.
Right. And talk about the positives and negatives of my life and those that are around, because it's like, we are humans, and we need to talk about being humans to actually have some decent mental health.
Absolutely.
Because even though this is all on social media, to try to rebalance that voice that like, I'm not good enough because I've seen a dozen people do better today, right? Because I'm checking it multiple times a day, right? I'm on it for an hour or whatever amount of time. And so because of seeing everybody else's success, then I don't understand my own and where I am in life.
Right.
Yeah. So 20-year plan, what's in 20 years? Like where does that go for you're 5 years into a 20-year plan? And and you said that's to be more selfless, is what I hear, and more sacrifice more for others. But what is that?
That is having the flexibility and time, the flexibility to serve in my church community in a deeper way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that is. I just know that it's going to be a deeper way, right? And that I'm able to be with my friends more. You know, some of that for me, golf is a place where I really connect with people. Not very good at it, but I love connecting with people there.
Yeah.
And I enjoy.
Well, it's a vested amount of time that you're
Right.
together
Yeah.
in a very
Yeah.
small space, right?
Right.
Even
Exactly.
though, but then you're also, I had Steve Kick on here, like you're grounded in nature. I feel
Yeah,
like when you're golfing too,
absolutely.
it's like
It's-
all those different senses
Right.
are part of that.
Absolutely. It's being outside. It's
Yeah.
being with friends and enjoying it.
Mhm.
I don't take it very seriously. I take the relationship part of it very seriously. And being with my wife and being able to travel, having the flexibility to be able to travel, to be able to spend the time that we don't have now with our grandchildren. And honestly, from a travel standpoint, is honestly, we kind of really like going to monasteries. There's something about visiting monasteries, and there's a number of them across the United States that we like to see, and across the world. That would be like, before I die, I want to go to St. Catherine's.
Okay.
You know,
Where is that?
In Egypt.
In Egypt.
In Egypt, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I want to, that's where Moses received the tabernacle. So they're the tablets, and so that those are things to me that are really, you know, if they're
Why
big
have you
dreams.
not planned that trip yet?
Time and money.
Time and money.
Time and money. Yeah, time and money are the big things there.
Yeah.
And other priorities. You know, there's other priorities. And so until, as a parent, I think until all of my kids are launched, those are kind of like the priorities of taking care of them and helping them get launched.
Okay.
Right. And we're getting close.
Yeah.
Getting really close. And then we can start focusing in on some of those things. And it's prioritizing what, you know, in our just priorities in our lives, you know, that kind of, that don't necessarily get in the way of that, but there's a time for those things.
Yeah.
You know, and the time is not now.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah.
The time is not now.
The time is not now. No.
Yeah.
No. The time will be a little bit later.
Yeah.
You know, and I know how it will happen. I even know who can arrange it.
Yeah.
You know? So
I'm not good at waiting. You're good at waiting?
I've gotten better at it.
Okay.
I'm
for me,
getting
it's like
better at
I'm just going to schedule it.
Yeah,
like I got to put it on the calendar.
Sure,
right?
I understand.
Like,
yeah. But there's other things that are in front of that. You know, we're going to be married for 50 years. There's what do we do with that? What do we do with our daughter who's the fourth one graduated. Rebecca's gonna graduate with her bachelor's, and now she's gonna graduate in December with her master's. How do we help celebrate that? You know, there's all these other things that are kind of more priorities at this point, and those things will be there. And you know, in St. Catherine's isn't going anywhere.
Yeah,
it's going to be there.
It'll be there. When the timing's right.
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you're doing a lot of coaching now.
I am.
And you're enjoying it.
I love coach. You know, I've been at all my life. I've trained people. That's what I mean. That's when I was in the restaurant business, as a district and regional manager. That's what I did. I trained people. As a general manager, I always I was always the training store. I started training when I remember when as a young, very very young, like 20, 21 years old. My boss came in and taught me about this thing called leadership skills. And I'm like, well, what's leadership skills? Well, it was a program that Pizza Hut had developed. He came in and ran the shift while I could learn this stuff.
Okay.
And then he had me train the other managers in his area. So training, which then became kind of more mentoring and now has moved into coaching.
Yeah.
And coaching is just it's a great way to connect with people and listen to people from all kinds of walks of life and all different experiences. And, you know, from 19-year-olds, I'm thinking people I'm working with now, 19 to 68, 67, something like that. All different education backgrounds.
Yeah.
You know,
What's the book that talks about a men's journey in their years, and like the stage I keep on thinking about is the Sage.
Pilgrim's Progress, I think.
I
That's it.
think
That's
so,
what we're talking
yeah.
about. Yeah.
So
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
that you're in this stage phase, right? Where it's
Yeah.
just like you've gathered all the wisdom through your years and experience, and now instead of building, your job is to put back in the wisdom to
pouring into people.
others.
Yeah.
Does it feel that way when you're
Yeah.
coaching with somebody?
And I think it depends because truly coaching, you don't, you know,
It's not telling them.
it's
what
not
to do.
right. A coaching is really all about we believe that as a coach, we believe that the answer lies within the person that we're working with, and our job is to help draw that out.
Yeah.
Not to tell them what it is, but let them draw that out and draw that conclusion. Because we know that if they draw it out, if it's their conclusion, they're going to succeed at it, right? As opposed to me telling them what to do. In certain situations, like I'm coaching right now in some business, in some folks that are my client is the business, but it's their employee. So there is a little bit of that mentoring piece that comes in, but it's all got to come from them first, right? So it's kind of where do they want to focus their time and attention, and in certain things, it becomes just by life experience. They don't have the life experience, let's say, to maybe deal with budgeting and finance of their finances, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it is a fine line, and you always ask permission. You always ask, can I give a suggestion? Okay?
Yeah.
And never
just impose it.
Right, never impose it, because then you're defeating the whole purpose behind that conversation. Because coaching is a space where this kind of sacred space where people can be vulnerable and speak what's really inside them, and have somebody listen to them and hear them. And I think that's something that there's this. We want to be heard. Everybody wants to be heard, and as a parent, I mean, that's right. One of the biggest challenges, hearing your child, right? They want to be heard. You're not listening to me, right? And people really want to be heard. And I think we're seeing more and more of that. And I think from a pure management point of view too, we're our culture has shifted from, when I started working, it was, I need these 5 things done. Nobody would ask you why. You just did them because that's what you did, right?
So you told,
you did it, right?
The Industrial Revolution kind of thing. Do these 5 tasks to equal X.
And now it has to make some sense, right? We have to have some reasoning behind it. There may be some discussion about that. And there's obviously, in management, there might be critical things that have to be done now. But then if we can bring that shift the dialogue with when coaching, especially in an employee-employer relationship, if we can shift the dialogue to the employee and not to the problem, let the employee look at the problem, then I think we get more success. And to do that, if we think about real estate and helping a new agent with a problem, do we tell them how to solve the problem, or do we ask them lots of questions so they can work through the problem?
Yeah.
And then if they can work through that problem, something similar is going to come up, and maybe they can work through that then and not need us. And that's our goal, right?
I don't think most people think of that as coaching, right?
I know they don't. They probably don't. No.
I think like if I go to a real estate conference or to any public speaker that says that they're a coach too, and they're speaking to get coaching clients, it seems like we're going to give you the 10 things to make you successful.
Well,
right?
Yeah.
It seems like it's more, coaching is more about motivational pushing and follow my system to equal success. Then you have success within you, and my job is to come alongside of you to pull that out.
Sure. Yeah. And that's where, for me, when I first got into real estate and I looked at various coaching companies, that's why I was attracted to this guy, Joe Stump. He runs Buy Refer Only, and for the most part, he really talks about authenticity and being. He doesn't. Yeah, there's some systems and tools, right? Because there's got to be some systems and tools, but for the most part, it's really about personal development, really about personal growth and development, and find your authentic self. And in fact, I left his coaching program to pursue the church because I needed more space, And it was directly a result of his training, of his coaching with me, that helped me to be able to make that jump. to be able to let go of that so that I could focus on that spiritual aspect of my life.
But you're back working with him again, right?
Oh yeah, I mean I do, but not in that closeness, right? Not in that closeness of a thing.
Okay.
Just because of the time, space, and expense, and all those things. Yeah. Yeah. I'll never fully let go of that because there's just a relationship there that's good, and
it works for you.
It works for me. Yeah, that system works for me. Right. Yeah. But coaching is not about your typical. I mean, I agree. You go lots of conferences, and it's like, well, here's the 10 steps, and it's like, well, but they're not my 10 steps.
Yeah.
How can I bring these various things into my business that makes sense for me? And out of those 10, well, I really can't do that. Well, okay. Well, what do you want to do? How do you see making this happen?
Yeah, I always think of those. I've always thought about joining one of those companies, right? One of those coaching companies to learn and to grow, but I've always struggled where it doesn't give me I don't feel the freedom of doing my own thing too, right? Which is probably bad at times because I really shouldn't do my own thing and just should do the system, right?
No, maybe not.
Yeah.
It depends. If it's not authentic to you, then what good is it?
Yeah, because then it'll show now.
Right, exactly. Right? And how can you be successful with something if it's not authentically you?
Yeah.
I think that's the key. And I think for me, my coaching practice is focused really for the most part on life and kind of business development, if you will. Not necessarily. I love working with. I know a lot about restaurants. So I love working with young restaurant managers. That's always good for me. But I'm also working with one of the guys I'm working with is a PhD and does a lot of things in the religious space. So,
how did you find these clients?
Some of them just kind of really naturally and organically.
Okay. You just said, hey, I can coach.
It just kind of came about through people I've met and some discussions and, their bosses or whatever. And it's like, well, we could do this. And, well, that'd be a good idea. So, yeah.
Yeah. And is that really where the fourth quarter goes into coaching?
Yeah.
I mean, you're still selling real estate. I don't want to put that out on a pasture.
Oh, yeah. No, I continue to sell real estate and it's.
But you would love to get into that world 100%. Like just coaching
that would be
and mentoring.
That would be that's the ultimate objective is to be into coaching and mentoring. It's portable. You can go where you need to go, and now with technology, you can coach anybody anywhere in the world. Yeah, which is beautiful.
If someone wants a coach and is attracted to this conversation, how would they connect with you?
They can email me at rvkaufman.com.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, rvkaufman@gmail.com.
At Gmail.
Yeah, at Gmail. That's the quickest way to get a hold of me.
Yeah.
And they can call me, and I don't know how we do that, but I don't care. My number is 616-821-3743.
Yeah. They'll listen, or they can comment, right? Or
comment.
Message
they can
me.
comment. We'll message them back.
We'll connect with them.
Yep.
Because I have had coaches over the years, and but the coaches have been more like you.
Sure.
Where, again, in our world of real estate, I really preferred and wanted a business coach, and Rob Elliott.
Yep.
I don't know if you know Rob Elliott or not. He's plays golf with me in that men's league. He's my dude. And he'll be on the podcast, I think next week, maybe, or the following. But the difference is I'm bringing in here's my 10 things I need you to fix, and he's like, I'm not fixing anything.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
I don't need to fix. You're smart.
Yep.
You're one of the most smart dudes I know. Well, figure it out, Steve. Let's plus and minus some of these things together.
Yep.
But he always says, rarely do I have the answer. They already have the answer in them.
It's already in.
They just want to talk it out with me.
Yeah.
So it's almost like counseling, but not, right? We're not getting into trauma and the emotion.
There's a clear line there.
There's a clear line. It's not counseling, but the coaching, because of the mentorship component, is I'm here to be your dude,
sure,
or your lady if it's a female coach, to just really sit with you while you figure out these things, and I'm just going to point out a couple of things along the way. Right. To lead you in that thought process that you're already had. Like most of the time I've already made the decision.
Absolutely.
I'll meet up with Elliot really only probably 4 times a year or so, but it's always like, I think there's a big transition that needs to happen.
Yeah.
And then I go with him and I've already made the decision. I'm just trying to gut check the decision, right? It's like, oh, okay, I think I'm going to head this way. And he's like, yeah, you should have done that 6 months ago, but you had to figure that out, Steve. I'm not going to tell you.
And you need to be heard. And and it's a place where you can be heard.
Yeah.
Right. And actually have somebody that really listens to you.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. And there's also, for those that don't have this kind of a coach right now, there is something in paying him as well, in this idea that like, hey, like he's expensive. And so I need to use his time wisely.
Right. Yeah.
And then I get the opportunity to learn from somebody that like I typically wouldn't have access to, right? And so I think that often coaching is undervalued in what should get paid or what they get paid.
Sure.
And I struggle with that all the time. Yeah. I don't know why. I'm struggling that with one of my sons, Elliot. He's playing baseball. He's a sophomore. He really wants to get better. And so, we need to get him a coach, right? But coaches are expensive.
They're very expensive.
They're very expensive.
Very expensive. Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm like, holy cow. Your 45 minutes is $65, for hitting baseballs. And I'm thinking to myself like, oh, wow. Okay. But I need to figure out how to make that work financially because like, that's again, going to teach him that like, there's a value, there's value in paying that because the experience equals that. Right.
Yeah.
And without being willing to then sacrifice to equal that, like then really is the goal worth going after.
Right.
Sometimes I think paying Elliot like I do, it's like, okay, I need to be heard and I need someone with wisdom to help me think through this.
Sure.
And in paying, I'm holding myself accountable because I am paying.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's not a buddy that's just like,
it's not a conversation.
It's not a conversational over a beer. Yeah, or not. Yes.
Yeah.
I have a lot of friends that I will. I'm part of this men's book club. We talked a little bit about that. Like, really great conversations, and I could bring up a lot of these things with them and get good advice.
Right.
But at the end of the day, when I'm paying Rob, I'm getting like a different sense for myself. I'm getting a different sense of accountability. Where it's like, hey, your wisdom, I need to take action on because I just paid you for that wisdom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if I don't, okay, like why am I just hearing myself talk that? Right?
But there is something that kind of, you can usually see it. I mean, sitting on this side of that conversation, I can usually see it when it clicks and it's like, oh, I just said that.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
All of a sudden something comes out and it's like, it was in there. And it's like, that's the answer. It's like, good.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's write it down and work on the plan to make that happen or whatever.
It's fun to do this podcast. So I'm seeing those themes, right?
Sure.
With those that have been on here so far of the gratitude journal is becoming a pretty big theme.
Yep.
Nature is becoming a pretty big thing of getting back to nature. And then, this coaching idea of like, you need steady coaching, to, as you said, to bridge the gap, right? From where you are now to where you want to go. You're the coach is helping you try to get to the now to move that faster.
Yeah, exactly.
I probably should get a coach. Rob is great. Nothing wrong with Rob, but, he's expensive. And I probably should just pay the money to see Rob more, though. Actually,
you'd probably get a lot out of it.
I'd probably get more out of it.
You probably would, yeah.
Yeah.
And not worry about it, and just say this is
part
of my life and part of what I got to do. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's interesting when you make the investment in yourself, how you actually do the work, right?
Yes.
So I think sometimes, for me, it's like, if I call Rob, then I got to do the work.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
And sometimes we just don't want to
'Cause you
do the
can't.
work.
I'm not going to spend that much money if I'm not going to do it.
Right.
Right? Why
If I'm
would I
not
do it?
going to
Right.
show
Exactly.
up
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and do the activities, then
Mhm.
like, why would I do it?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything else to wrap us up? We got a couple more minutes, but is there anything
Um,
that you really would love to hit on that we did not hit on, or
I think
questions or thoughts that the audience
one
might?
one of the things we talked about were like pivotal moments, right?
Yeah.
And I think, and I talked to one of them about the adoption of my kids.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big one. I think that if people want to know me, they need to understand a couple of those things, right?
Yeah,
And
please.
and one of them was, and again, it was a coaching experience where I spent a weekend in Northern California in this guy's house, and there was 4 of us, and we went around a table about this size. We had dinner, and then in the middle there, we had to answer 35 questions, and they were very, very personal.
Wow.
I mean, they were
Yeah.
like, and in the middle was this bowl that had stuff in it. We didn't know what it was. And I was the first one to eat because I eat really fast. Too many years in the restaurant business, I eat real fast.
Yeah,
So they said, well, you're going to start. So I pulled out this thing, and it was a question, and I had to answer it.
Okay.
And for the next 3 hours, we talked about this question. And it got
Just one question?
one question.
Okay.
And it was,
What was the question?
I don't remember the exact question.
Okay.
But it got into some really deep stuff. But this whole weekend was focused about really digging deep into what was at our core. And one of the moments was this kind of role play of a conversation with my mother. And it was kind of a little woo-hoo. I mean, in a certain degree, kind of this kind of new agey kind of thing. But at the same time, he was trying to get me to understand her perspective as the youngest of 7 kids, the baby of the family, all these kind of things. And we had a conversation about it. My mother and I had a conversation about it, me playing both parts. And it was earth-shattering for me because it helped me to get over any of her weakness that I ever saw in her, right? Because she ended her life not a very happy woman, right? But that was really important. And then the other thing that happened was there was 3 guys and myself, and we left, and we had some time to kill. It was a Sunday before the flight, so we had several hours before the flight went home. And so we went to this park that had redwoods in it. And when I was a kid, like 12 years old, I wrote this report on redwoods and thought how fascinating this was. And so we were in this forest that looked kind of like what I thought of the Shire would look like.
Yeah.
I mean, because it was kind of dark, but it was there's water, moss growing over everything. Like the water fountains were completely covered in moss. It was this beautiful, surreal moment. Yeah. And one of the guys said, well, let's go up the mountain. I thought, okay. Well, we did it by car, and it was a 2-track going up this mountain. And we met a car on the way down, and I was sitting in the back. It was a club cab, kind of a crew cab truck, and I'm sitting in the back. And scariest thing ever, right? And I never would have gone up this thing by myself because it was just too risky because of this 2-track. And at one point, he had to back up, and I swear we were going to fall off the edge of this mountain. But we came around a curve, and we got to the top of this mountain, and you could see all of Northern California. And it was that kind of mountaintop moment, where it was God's glory just out there.
Yeah.
And it finished this beautiful weekend for me that radically changed where I was going. And at that moment is when I decided that, and a couple other instances that happened shortly thereafter, that I was going to pursue a theological program for my church. Not really knowing where it was going to take me, but I knew that I needed to do this thing. And then it was November of 2022. I had finished the program. My priest said to me, "Well, now you can become a deacon." And I said, "Well, okay. Well, let's talk about that." And he said, "Well, let's do this first." And so I was doing some service in the church. And in November, he called me and asked me if there was any reason that he shouldn't put forth my name for the diaconate. And it was, I paused, and I didn't really know how to respond. And I just, I don't think so. And so he said, good. So here's what's going to happen. And he ran through this whole thing. Well, long story short, he got COVID. The ordination didn't happen at the time it was supposed to. It happened, and it was February 27th of, it was 22. it was 22 or 23 anyway, that I was ordained a deacon in the Orthodox Church.
So 2 years ago.
2 years ago. Yeah. Almost 3 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is probably one of the more pivotal things for me, because so in the Orthodox Church there's 3 levels of ordination. We have bishops, or we have deacons, priests, and bishops. Deacons and priests can be married, bishops cannot. They can be widowed, but they can't be married. Mm-hmm. So and you're a deacon forever. Mm-hmm. It's not you can't really walk away from it unless you're walking away from the church, right? And for me, it's the ultimate symbol of being of service, because I mean the first deacon in his outline of the Bible was Stephen, right? And Stephen was martyred, right? But he was the first deacon. And what did the deacons do? They served the tables, right? They were there to help distribute the goods to the poor. And that has really become kind of my life's calling, right? To somehow serve deeper in a deeper way than I am every day. I'm just figuring out ways that I can be more of service to other people. And I talked earlier about this idea of moving into a sacred space, of making this space sacred, making my business sacred. That it's a business. My business is my mission, right? It's a mission of helping people. I don't count gross commissions. Mm-hmm. I count people served. Mm-hmm. How many people did I serve? And that may be saying it's not the time for you to do this. It might be saying, yeah, it is. It's perfect. Let's make this happen. But it's doing what's right for them and helping them to advance in whatever way makes sense for them, right? It's coaching and helping people to get a better understanding. It's serving in the church, in my church community, in various ministries around town, that sort of thing. So that's those are huge moments. And the thing with that too is that my wife and I are doing this together. It's something that the church looks at it as though we're both in this ministry. She's part of that ministry because we're married, right? Mm-hmm. And so she had to sign my papers, right? My ordination papers. She had to sign it to agree that
this is what we're doing.
This is it, because it's a lot of sacrifice. I mean, it's. I remember asking my priest. His name is Father Michael, and I said, "Well, so Father, tell me what's required of me. When do I have to be here?" He said, "Well, unless you're sick or out of town." Oh, okay. So it's not like you can get up on Sunday morning and go, I don't feel like this today, right? I don't sleep. Yeah, I'm going to sleep in, right? And we're there. I'm there, a little bit about 8:00. The service doesn't start till about 9, and I'm there till it's done, and then beyond, right? And so there's this, and I don't know. It's hard to explain, because somebody might look and go, well, you're not really doing a lot, but yet you are. Because there's all this kind of hidden work, right, that goes on, and we support the services and support the priest and what they're doing and delivering the sacraments, that sort of thing.
But it doesn't really matter what people say of like, are you doing a lot or not? Because for you, it's moving into that fourth quarter, and you saying, this is the place in which I feel like I can sacrifice whatever that is of myself to a greater calling.
Yeah. And it's a place that I find real deep peace. So it's this almost my first. We had this very large service during Lent, and I sat there and I was seated during the homily. We were all kind of sitting there, and there were priests from all the parishes, and I was adding up the years of service, and I think I came up to close to 300 years of service with all these men that I was sitting with, and I just was kind of in awe and thought, I'm sitting here with them. How does that happen? And I think of that starting with this, kid that started working at a Pizza Hut. And here I am with some of these, some brilliant people, just brilliant men, brilliant people. And with a history of one of our retired priests. He was an Episcopalian priest for over 40 years. Served as a chaplain in Vietnam. Just this depth of service and commitment to serve people, commitment to God is just amazing, and that's just one of many. One of many. So that's a piece for me that permeates everything in my, all my business, all my, everything starts with that kind of basis of, of my faith has to be part of that. So
yeah. Well, thank you for coming on.
oh, thank you,
and thank you for
having me.
sharing
I
that
appreciate
journey and that
Yeah.
story. Because I think so many people are desperately seeking for something right now.
Deeper meaning, right?
Deeper meaning.
Deeper
We
meaning,
went
yeah.
through COVID.
Yep.
We came out the
Yeah.
other side, and
Right.
and I think we talked a little bit about this last week. There's just such a significant sort of space out there, and where people are
Absolutely.
like, okay,
Yeah.
what is now? The money success side isn't necessarily
Right.
my journey anymore,
Yeah.
right? Because that didn't
very
help me
fleeting.
during through COVID.
It's very
It was
fleeting.
very
Yeah,
fleeting.
very
And so
fleeting.
where do I go?
Right.
So thank you.
Thank you.
I hope that this
Appreciate it.
helped those that watch. And
Me too. Yeah.
it doesn't matter.
Right.
It was just cool to hang out with
Absolutely.
you and to
Yeah.
hear your story and your journey again. And thanks for sharing it. If you guys want to get a hold of us, feel free to leave a comment. And
Absolutely. It'd be great.
Ryan's available for more coaching clients. I'm not a good coach. I'll just tell you what to do. I got too much vigor in me still. But either way, this is Steve. I'm just Steve the podcast with my buddy Ryan. Thanks guys.
Steve. Thanks.
All right. See ya.